The first time I saw Alexander Blackwood, I felt the axis of my world tilt. It was at a charity gala, one of those events where the air smells like old money and new ambition. I was there as a junior associate for the PR firm handling the event, a nobody in a sea of somebodies. He was there as the guest of honor, the prodigal son and newly minted CEO of Blackwood Industries. He was magnetic. Tall, with hair the color of dark espresso and eyes that held the stormy gray of a winter sea. He moved through the crowd with an easy, predatory grace, and when his gaze swept over me, it didn't slide away like it did with everyone else. It stuck. It dissected. It saw the ambitious, wide-eyed girl from a small town trying to make it in the big city, and for some reason it was intrigued. Our courtship was a whirlwind, a cliché I would have scoffed at in any other context. He was 10 years my senior, a man who owned boardrooms, and I was a girl who still worried about paying her rent on time. He didn't just sweep me off my feet. He lifted me into a stratosphere I never knew existed. Private jets to Paris for a weekend, dinners at restaurants where the menus had no prices, whispered conversations in the back of his town car where he told me I was different, I was real, I was the only one who didn't want something from him. I believed him. God, I was so naive. I fell in love with the man I saw in the quiet moments. The one who looked tired after a long day, the one who told me about the pressure from his father to be perfect, the one who held my hand like it was a lifeline. I saw the vulnerability beneath the granite exterior, and I mistook my ability to see it for a unique connection. I thought I was healing him. I didn't realize I was just a temporary bomb. We were together for a year when I found out I was pregnant. It was a shock, a seismic event that sent cracks through the beautiful, fragile world we'd built. I remember my hands trembling as I held the plastic stick, the 2 pink lines a verdict, not a blessing. I told him that night at his penthouse. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking out at the city he commanded. I stood in the center of the vast minimalist living room, feeling small and terribly significant all at once. "Alexander," I began, my voice barely a whisper. "We need to talk." He turned, a slight, indulgent smile on his face. "What is it, Alara? You look serious." I took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The smile vanished. The glass in his hand stilled. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, suffocating. It stretched for an eternity, filled only by the frantic beating of my own heart. "Pregnant," he repeated, the word flat, devoid of emotion. "Yes." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. "I know it's a shock. It is for me too. But we'll figure it out, right? Together." He placed his glass down on a chrome side table with a sharp, final click. He walked towards me, but it wasn't the warm, possessive stride I was used to. This was the walk of a CEO approaching a problematic balance sheet. "There's no question about what happens," he said, his voice cool and detached. "We'll get married. Immediately. A small, private ceremony. We'll issue a press release framing it as a joyful, planned event. A new heir for Blackwood Industries." I blinked, the romantic proposals I'd secretly fantasized about crumbling to dust. "Married? Alexander, is that what you want?" His gray eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw no warmth in them. Only calculation. "It's what's necessary. A pregnancy out of wedlock is a distraction the company doesn't need. A shotgun wedding is a scandal. A planned happy marriage is a story. We control the narrative." The words felt like shards of glass in my skin. Control the narrative. I was a narrative to be controlled. The life growing inside me was a corporate strategy. "But what about us?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What about what we have?" He cupped my chin, his touch firm, almost clinical. "This is about us, Alara. This secures our future. Your future. The child's future. It's the logical next step. Logic, not love." I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. But I was 24, in love and terrified. The part of me that was still the small-town girl was dazzled by the promise of his world, and the part of me that loved him desperately wanted to believe that his coldness was just a facade, a man dealing with a shock in the only way he knew how. So I agreed. The wedding was a cold, efficient affair at the city courthouse. I wore a simple cream-colored dress. He wore a severe black suit. His parents were there, his mother's smile brittle, his father's handshake crushing. My own mother, flushed with pride and oblivious to the truth, cried happy tears. Alexander held my hand, his grip tight, his smile a perfect, polished mask for the cameras he'd arranged to be there. That night, in our new, cavernous marital home, he didn't touch me. He poured himself a drink and retired to his study, telling me he had a merger to finalize. I stood alone in the master bedroom, my wedding ring feeling like a brand on my finger, and I cried for the girl who thought she was getting a fairy tale. I was just beginning to understand that I had walked into a gilded cage. The next few months were a study in isolation. Alexander was increasingly absent, buried in work. When he was home, he was distant, his attention always on his phone or his laptop. He attended prenatal appointments with the air of a man fulfilling a contractual obligation. He'd pat my growing belly, call me Mrs. Blackwood in that flat tone, and discuss nursery colors with the same enthusiasm he'd use for selecting office carpet. The cracks were no longer cracks, they were chasms, and I was falling. One afternoon, about 7 months into the pregnancy, I was in his home office looking for a book I'd been reading. His laptop was open and a Skype call was incoming. The name made my blood run cold. Lily Ashford. Lily. His college sweetheart. The one I'd heard whispered about in society circles. The one who had left him to pursue a ballet career in Europe. The one he'd never quite gotten over, according to the tabloids I'd secretly devoured in the early days. My heart hammered against my ribs. I shouldn't. It was a violation. But a force stronger than my morality made me click, answer. The screen flickered to life. And there she was. Lillian Ashford was even more stunning in person than in photographs. She had cascading honey blonde hair, eyes the color of the summer sky, and a delicate, ethereal beauty that made me feel like a clumsy peasant. Alex. You're there. Her voice was a melodic chime. I was hoping I'd catch you. The connection from Milan has been dreadful. I couldn't speak. I just stared, my hand instinctively going to my swollen stomach. Her perfect smile faltered as she took me in. Oh. You must be Alara. There was no malice in her voice, only a faint, pitying curiosity. I found my voice a ragged thing. He's not here. I see, she said, her gaze dropping to my belly and then back to my face. A small, sad smile touched her lips. Look at you. Poor thing. The condescension in her tone was a physical blow. What do you want? I managed to ask. I just wanted to talk to Alex, she said lightly. I'm moving back to the city next month. My contract with the ballet is finished. She leaned closer to her screen, her expression one of genuine, heartbreaking sympathy. He told me, about the Oi situation. He's so noble taking responsibility like this. It must be so difficult for you both. The world tilted on its axis. Taking responsibility. The situation. What are you talking about? My voice was a whisper. Her eyes widened in feigned surprise, but I saw the flicker of satisfaction in them. She was a masterful actress. Oh darling. Don't tell me you don't know? Alex and we reconnected just before he found out about your condition. We realized we'd made a terrible mistake all those years ago. We were planning our future. He was going to end things with you. She sighed, a delicate, tragic sound. And then you got pregnant. He's a man of honor, my Alex. He said he was trapped. He said, Lily, she trapped me with a baby, otherwise I would have married you. He had to do the right thing. The words landed like a bomb in the center of my soul. She trapped me with a baby. Otherwise I would have married you. Every moment of the past year rearranged itself into a horrifying new picture. The cold proposal. The distant marriage. The absent husband. It wasn't shock or an inability to process emotion. It was resentment. I wasn't his wife, I was his jailer. Our child wasn't a blessing, it was a trap. I felt the baby kick, a hard, frantic movement, as if it too felt the foundations of its world shatter. I have to go, I choked out, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall in front of her. Of course, Lily said, her voice dripping with false kindness. Take care of yourself, Alara. And the baby. The screen went black. I stood there in the opulent silence of my prison, my body trembling violently. The love I had felt for Alexander curdled into something dark and cold and sharp. The grief for my broken fairy tale was incinerated by a white-hot rage. He thought he was trapped? He had no idea what trapped felt like. He thought he had destroyed me by marrying me? He had just given me all the power. I looked down at my stomach at the life we had created. My child. My son or daughter. Not a trap. A weapon. The key to my cage. A calmness settled over me, colder and more formidable than any anger. I walked to the mirror and looked at my reflection. The pale, pregnant wife, the discarded lover. I met my own eyes and I saw a new person staring back. A person with nothing left to lose. Okay, Alexander, I whispered to my reflection, my voice steady and sure for the first time in months. You wanted to control the narrative? Let's see you try. I had a new purpose. A new plan. I would play the dutiful, oblivious wife. I would be the perfect mother to his heir. I would lull him into a false sense of security. And when the time was right, when he thought he was safest, I would destroy him. I silently began to plan my revenge. The days after the call with Lily were a study in performance art. I learned to school my features into a mask of placid contentment. I let my hands tremble only when I was locked in the bathroom, the shower running to muffle the sound of my sobs. The rest of the time I was Alara Blackwood, the blissfully expectant mother, dedicated to building a perfect life for her family. Alexander noticed the change. How could he not? The tense, watchful wife was gone, replaced by a serene, smiling one. I stopped asking him where he'd been. I stopped trying to initiate conversation over our silent dinners. I began to focus entirely on the baby, on the nursery, on the superficial trappings of our life. The interior designer is coming tomorrow to finalize the nursery fabrics, I told him one evening, my voice light and cheerful as I spread pâté on a cracker. I was thinking a neutral palette. Creams and soft grays. Very modern. He looked up from his financial tablet, his gray eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to solve a new business problem. That's fine. Whatever you think is best. I do, I said, meeting his gaze with a warm smile. I want everything to be perfect for our son. He flinched almost imperceptibly at the word, son. We didn't know the gender yet, but I'd started using the pronoun, testing the waters. He hated it. It made the abstract reality of the child too concrete, too personal. It might be a daughter, he said, his tone clipped. Either way, I said, my smile never wavering, they will be so loved. I saw the confusion in his eyes. This wasn't the script. The trapped, emotional wife was supposed to be a nagging, miserable presence, reinforcing his narrative of noble sacrifice. This cheerful, capable woman unsettled him. This was my first victory. I used my newfound serenity to gain small freedoms. I told him I needed to take prenatal yoga for my back pain. He agreed, eager to have me out of the house and occupied. The class was held in a bright, airy studio downtown, filled with other glowing, happy women. I was the outlier, my glow a carefully applied veneer. But it was there I met Sarah. A fiery redhead with a sharp wit and a 7-month bump of her own. She was the first person in months who didn't look at me as Mrs. Blackwood. She saw Alara. You look like you could use a decaf latte and a bitch session, she'd said after our first class, her green eyes twinkling. It was the most human interaction I'd had since my world collapsed. Over lattes we traded stories. She was a freelance graphic designer, married to a high school teacher. Their life was messy, loud, and filled with love. I spun her a sanitized version of my own. A whirlwind romance, a quick marriage, a distant husband who was married to his work. He sounds like a prick, Sarah said bluntly, and I almost wept with relief at her honesty. He is, I confessed, the words feeling like a confession. But I'm managing. Sarah became my anchor to the real world. She was also my first unwitting accomplice. Through her, I started to rebuild a network, a life outside the Blackwood Empire. I started to remember who I was before Alexander. Meanwhile, at home I played my part to perfection. I hosted a dinner for his parents, charming his frosty mother with my knowledge of antique porcelain, a subject I'd spent a week feverishly researching. I discussed market fluctuations with his father, offering innocuous, intelligent comments that made him look at me with a flicker of respect. I was proving myself to be the perfect corporate wife, an asset. I was making myself invaluable to the narrative. One night, Alexander came home late. I was in the library reading a book on asset management. Another piece of my research. He stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, a faint smell of whiskey clinging to him. You're up late, he said, his voice rough. Just reading, I said, looking up and giving him my warm, wifely smile. You look tired. Can I get you anything? Something to eat. He stared at me a long searching look. Why are you doing this, Ilara? My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression placid. Doing what, darling? This? He gestured vaguely at me at the book in my lap at the entire performance. You're so agreeable. You were so upset before. I closed the book, marking my page with a deliberate slowness. I was hormonal, Alexander. And scared. But I've had time to think. You were right. This is our future. This baby is a blessing. We need to present a united front. For the company, for the family. I used his own words, his own logic, and fed them back to him. I want to be a partner to you. A real partner. He took a step into the room, his gaze intense. I could see the wariness in his eyes, but also a flicker of something else. Relief, perhaps. The relief of a man who thinks his problem has solved itself. A partner, he repeated. Yes, I said, standing up and walking towards him. I placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tense muscle beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. It was the first time I'd initiated touch in weeks. This is a business arrangement as much as it is a marriage, isn't it? I understand that now. Let me help. Let me be more than just the wife who had your baby. He looked down at my hand, then back at my face. The calculation was back in his eyes, but it was different now. I was no longer a liability to be managed. I was a potential asset to be utilized. What did you have in mind? He asked, his voice a low rumble. The annual Blackwood Foundation Gala is in 3 months, I said. Right after the baby is born. Let me handle it. All of it. The theme, the vendors, the PR. I used to do this for a living, remember? It will free you up to focus on the Asia-Pacific merger you've been stressed about. And it will show the world that the Blackwoods are stronger than ever. It was a masterstroke. I was offering to take on a significant visible burden, using my professional skills for his benefit, all while reinforcing the public image he craved. I was speaking his language. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. I held his gaze, my expression open, sincere, and utterly deceptive. All right, he said finally. You can head the committee. I'll have my assistant send you the files tomorrow. Thank you, Alexander, I said, my voice soft. You won't regret it. As I turned to go upstairs, I allowed the smile to finally fall from my face. He thought he was granting me a favor. He was actually handing me the keys to the kingdom. The gala was one of the most high-profile social events of the year, covered by every major outlet. It was the perfect stage. The next morning, his assistant, a perpetually flustered woman named Brenda, sent over a mountain of digital files. Budgets, vendor lists, media contacts, guest lists from previous years. I dove in with a ferocious intensity one hadn't felt since before the pregnancy. This was no longer about decorating a nursery. This was about understanding the machinery of Alexander's world so I could learn how to break it. I spent my days at prenatal yoga with Sarah, my afternoons planning the gala, and my nights buried in financial reports and company structures I accessed through his home computer. I learned about his business rivals, his allies, his weaknesses. I noted every name on the guest list, cross-referencing them with corporate holdings and social connections. I was a ghost in his machine, learning its every cog and lever. The final piece of my plan fell into place during a routine prenatal appointment. My doctor, a kind, older woman, smiled as she finished her ultrasound. Everything looks perfect, Ilara. The baby is in the ideal position. You're a textbook case. He paused, looking at my chart. And you're sure you want to bank the cord blood? It's a very personal decision. Cord blood banking. A service offered by a private company, where the blood from the umbilical cord, rich in stem cells, is collected and stored for potential future medical use. It was expensive, largely seen as an insurance policy for the ultra-wealthy. Alexander had insisted on it. It's what we do, he'd said. The Blackwoods are prepared for every contingency. I'd agreed at the time, seeing it as another cold corporate decision about our child's body. But now I saw it for what it was. A loophole. A flaw in his fortress. The company that handled the banking BioFuture required extensive paperwork, including the legal rights of access. As the mother, I had to sign. And as I read through the dense legalese, an idea, dark and brilliant, began to form. I couldn't take his money. Not yet. Prenuptial agreements and a team of vicious lawyers protected him. I couldn't publicly shame him without looking like a scorned, hysterical woman. He would spin it and I would lose. But I could take something more precious. I could take his legacy. The baby kicked, a rolling, insistent movement. I placed my hand on my stomach, a genuine smile, the first in a long time, touching my lips. Soon, little one, I whispered. Mama is building us a new life. I was no longer the prisoner. I was the architect. And the foundations of Alexander's destruction were being laid, brick by silent, careful brick. The pain was a living thing, a primal force that ripped through my body, erasing everything. The revenge plot, the anger, the heartbreak. There was only the all-consuming need to breathe, to push, to survive. In the sterile, bright delivery room, Alexander stood by the window, a silhouette against the city lights. He wasn't holding my hand. He wasn't offering words of encouragement. He was on his phone, his voice a low, steady murmur about stock prices and quarterly reports. The doctor and nurses moved around him, their glances at him a mixture of pity for me and professional disdain for him. I didn't care. His presence was irrelevant. This was between me and the tiny life fighting its way into the world. One more big push, Lara, the doctor urged, her voice calm and sure. I bore down, a guttural sound tearing from my throat, my entire universe contracting to this single, searing moment. And then release. A sudden, shocking emptiness followed by a thin, indignant wail. A cry that split the world in two. The before and the after. They placed him on my chest, a squirming, bloody, perfect creature. He was covered in a fine white vernix, his head a mess of dark, wet hair, his tiny fists clenched in fury. He stopped crying the moment his skin touched mine. His eyes, a murky newborn blue, blinked open and he seemed to look right at me. A love so fierce, so instantaneous, it stole the air from my lungs. It was a tsunami, washing away the remnants of the broken woman I had been. This was my son. My Sebastian. My reason for everything. He's perfect, I whispered, my voice choked with tears that were 100% real. Alexander finally approached, peering down at us. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of awe, revulsion, and what might have been a flicker of fear. A boy, he said, his voice flat. Sebastian, I said, not asking but telling him. I had chosen the name weeks ago, a name that meant venerable, a name of strength. Alexander hadn't objected. He hadn't cared enough. He nodded slowly. Sebastian Blackwood. He said the name like he was testing the sound of a new brand. He reached out a tentative finger and brushed Sebastian's tiny hand. The baby's fingers uncurled, instinctively grasping his father's finger. For a single heart-stopping second I saw it. A crack in the granite. A glimpse of the man I thought I'd married. His eyes softened, his lips parted. He looked from Sebastian's tiny hand to my face, and for a fleeting moment, it was just the three of us, a family. Then his phone buzzed. The spell shattered. He pulled his hand back, his face closing up once more. I have to take this. It's the Hong Kong office. And he walked out of the room, leaving me alone with our son. The moment the door clicked shut, any lingering doubt I had evaporated. That tiny flicker of humanity was just that. A flicker. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. He had looked at the miracle we had created and seen a conference call as more important. My resolve, which had been a cold, intellectual thing, now burned with the ferocity of a mother's love. I would not let this beautiful, innocent boy grow up in the shadow of a father who saw him as an obligation. I would not let him learn that love was conditional, that family was a transaction. I pressed my lips to Sebastian's warm, damp head. I will never let him hurt you, I vowed, my voice a low, steady promise. I will build you a world filled with real love. The next few weeks were a haze of sleepless nights, milky smells, and the overwhelming, all-consuming reality of motherhood. Alexander was mostly absent, using the demanding newborn phase as an excuse to spend even more time at the office. Or I was sure with Lily. I didn't care. His absence was a gift. It allowed me to bond with Sebastian without his cold energy poisoning the air. It also allowed me to put the final stages of my plan into motion. The Blackwood Foundation Gala was a month away. I threw myself into the planning with a renewed, almost manic energy. I used it as my cover. Under the guise of reviewing floral arrangements and seating charts, I was executing my exit strategy. With Sarah's help, who had also had her baby, a beautiful girl named Maya, I found an apartment. It wasn't in the glittering heart of the city. It was in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood across town, A place Alexander would never think to look. It was small, sunny, and it was ours. I paid the first and last month's rent in cash, using the small, secret fund I'd been siphoning from the household accounts, money he would never miss. I opened a new bank account under my maiden name, Elara Vance, at a different institution. I rented a small, secure storage unit and began, slowly and methodically, to move my most precious possessions there. Not the jewelry he'd given me or the designer clothes. Those were part of the costume. I took my books, the few photos I had of my father, the first stuffed animal I'd bought for Sebastian. I took the life I was reclaiming. The most dangerous part was the paperwork. I needed Sebastian's birth certificate and social security card. I needed my passport. And I needed the documents from BioFuture, the cord blood banking company. The day the documents arrived, my hands were ice cold. I sat at Alexander's desk, Sebastian sleeping soundly in a bassinet beside me. I filled out the forms with meticulous care. Under Primary Legal Guardian for Access, I wrote my name. Under Secondary Legal Guardian, I left it blank. Then, in the section specifying the conditions for the release of the sample to any other party, I added a clause, typed in clear, simple language. Release of the specimen to any individual other than the primary legal guardian, Elara Vance, requires notarized written consent from said guardian, regardless of parental or marital status. It was a long shot. I was no lawyer. But the fine print of these private contracts was often a gray area. I was betting on the company's liability aversion. I was betting that they would rather uphold a clause submitted by the mother than risk a lawsuit. I was creating a lock and I was taking the only key. I mailed the forms myself from a post office across the city. The gala preparations reached a fever pitch. I was the picture of efficiency, the darling of the Blackwood Foundation board. They adored me. I was young, beautiful, a new mother, and handling one of the most complex events of the year with effortless grace. I made a point of praising Alexander at every turn, telling everyone how supportive he was, how we were a team. The narrative was perfect. The night before I left, Alexander actually came home for dinner. Sebastian was fussy and I was walking him around the living room humming a soft lullaby. Alexander poured himself a drink and watched us. The gala is next week. Are you sure you're up for it? Of course, I said, bouncing Sebastian gently. It's all under control. It's going to be a night no one will ever forget. A faint, almost smile touched his lips. Good. The press will be there in full force. It's a good opportunity to present a strong image after the disruption of the birth. Disruption. My sweet son was a disruption. It will be perfect, I assured him, my voice like honey. Later that night, when the penthouse was silent, I packed a single large diaper bag. I took diapers, formula, a change of clothes for me and several for Sebastian. I packed the documents, my passport, the birth certificate, the social security card, and a copy of the BioFuture contract. I left my wedding ring and my Blackwood-issued credit cards on his dresser. I dressed Sebastian in a warm sleep sack and wrapped him in a soft blanket. He slept on, oblivious, his little chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom I had shared with a stranger and took one last look. There was no sadness, only a profound, chilling certainty. I walked out of the penthouse, down the private elevator and into the cool night air. A car, pre-booked and paid for with cash, was waiting at the curb. I didn't look back at the glittering tower that had been my prison. As the car pulled away, I held Sebastian closer, breathing in his sweet, milky scent. It's just you and me now, baby, I whispered into his downy hair. Just you and me. The first part was over. I had escaped. Now the real work began. The destruction of Alexander Blackwood was now my primary occupation. The first 48 hours were a terrifying blur of paranoia and primal instinct. The cash-only motel room I'd booked was shabby but clean, a world away from the marble and chrome of the penthouse. Sebastian, bless him, slept in stretches, his newborn obliviousness a shield against my racing heart. Every time a car door slammed outside, I jumped, my breath catching, convinced it was Alexander, that he had found us already. He didn't. His arrogance was my greatest ally. He would assume I'd run to my mother's or to a girlfriend's. He would send lackeys to those places. He would never imagine I was in a nondescript motel, planning my next move from the shadows. On the second day, using a cheap prepaid phone, I called Sarah. It's me, I said, my voice low. Alara? Oh my God, are you okay? The entire city is losing its mind. Alexander's office has called me 3 times. Her voice was a frantic whisper. I'm safe. Sebastian is safe. That's all that matters. Listen, Sarah, I need a huge favor. I need you to go to my storage unit. I gave her the unit number and code. There's a box there with a laptop and some files. Can you bring it to our spot? Our spot was a children's playground halfway between our 2 worlds. An hour later, I was pushing Sebastian on a baby swing with one hand, the diaper bag heavy with the contraband laptop at my feet. Sarah arrived, her face pale with worry, a large tote bag slung over her shoulder. He's gone nuclear, Alara, she said, thrusting the tote bag into the empty swing next to Sebastian. The press release his company put out. It says you're suffering from severe postpartum psychosis and that you've taken the baby and disappeared against medical advice. They're asking for the public's help in finding you for your own safety. A cold fury, clean and sharp, washed over me. Postpartum psychosis. Of course. It was the perfect narrative for him. It painted me as an unstable, dangerous woman and him as the desperate, concerned husband. It invalidated everything I was and everything I was doing. He was controlling the narrative just like he always did. He's lying, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. I know that. Sarah said, her eyes welling up. But everyone else. Alara, you have to come forward. You have to tell your side. Not yet, I said, shaking my head. If I come out now, it's a he said, she said. I'm the hysterical woman with a mental illness against the powerful, stable CEO. I'll lose. He'll get Sebastian back. The thought made my blood run cold. No, I have to wait. I have to let him hang himself with his own rope. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice full of fear and awe. I looked down at the tote bag, at the tools of my revenge. I'm going to become a ghost. And then I'm going to haunt him. Back in the motel room, I booted up the laptop. It was an old machine, one I'd owned before Alexander, clean of his corporate spyware. Using the public Wi-Fi, I began to work. My first move was financial. The small cash fund wouldn't last forever. But I had a weapon he didn't know about: knowledge. For months, as the perfect, interested wife, I had listened to him talk about the market. I'd read his discarded reports. I knew which startups Blackwood Industries was quietly acquiring, which green energy patents they were about to secure. I knew the inside track. With the last of my cash, I funded an anonymous online trading account. It was a huge risk. If I was wrong, we'd be destitute. But I wasn't wrong. I'd been an excellent PR executive because I was an excellent student of human behavior and market trends. I placed my bets, investing in the companies I knew were about to be buoyed by Blackwood's influence. Then I turned to my masterpiece, the gala. The event was now just 3 days away. The foundation staff was in a panic, thinking I'd vanished. Alexander, no doubt, was trying to appoint some flunky to take over. But he couldn't. I had designed it that way. I had centralized everything. All the vendors, all the passwords, all the contacts, they were all in my name, secured with passwords only I knew. The florist, the caterer, the band, the PR firm handling the media, they all reported to me. I had made myself indispensable. From the motel room, I became a puppet master. I sent emails from encrypted accounts. I made calls from my burner phone. To the PR firm. Hi, it's Alara Blackwood. Yes, I'm fine, just a nasty bout of flu. Listen, I have a fantastic new idea for the media gift bags. We're going to include a custom USB drive with a digital montage of the Foundation's best work this year. I'll send the video file over tomorrow. It's going to be wonderful. To the band leader. Hello, this is Mrs. Blackwood. A slight change to the set list for the evening. I'd like you to close the night with a very specific song. I'll have the sheet music messengered to you. It's a surprise for my husband. To the tech company handling the audiovisual presentation. The schedule for the speeches remains the same. My husband will give his address at 9 p.m. sharp. Please ensure the microphones are live and the large screens are ready. I'll be providing the video content for his introduction personally. I was weaving a web and Alexander, in his arrogance, was walking right into the center of it. He was so busy playing the distraught husband, so sure that his power and money could instantly fix the problem of my disappearance, that he never stopped to consider that the gala itself was the trap. A week after I left, my trading account saw its first major payoff. One of the startups I'd invested in was acquired. My initial investment quadrupled. It wasn't Blackwood money, but it was enough. Enough for a proper apartment deposit. Enough for groceries. Enough for freedom. I moved us out of the motel and into the small, sunny apartment I'd rented through Sarah. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled of someone else's cooking, and a view of a tree-lined street where children played. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. That night, as I fed Sebastian his bottle, I looked around our new home. It was sparse, but it was ours. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was peaceful. The space wasn't cavernous, it was cozy. We were safe. My burner phone vibrated. It was an alert I'd set up. A society blog had just broken the news, complete with grainy photos. Blackwood heir's wife still missing. Gala to go ahead as tribute. The article quoted a source close to the family, saying that Alexander was heartbroken but determined to carry on with the foundation's important work. It mentioned he would be attending the gala alone, to honor his wife's hard work and to plead for her safe return. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. He was taking the bait. He was going to the gala. He was going to stand on that stage and play the grieving hero. He thought the climax of this drama was my disappearance. He thought the story was about him. He had no idea that I was just about to start the 3rd act. I opened the laptop and pulled up the video file I'd been working on for weeks. It was a montage set to a haunting piano piece. It began with smiling photos of us from the early days, the ones I'd kept hidden away. Then it shifted. It showed text messages, his cold and distant, asking me to cancel dinner plans. It showed his empty side of the bed, day after day. And then the piece de resistance. A audio clip, clean and clear, extracted from the security system of his own home office. His voice, tired and exasperated, talking on the phone to his father the week before I left. "I know, Father. I know it's a mess. But what was I supposed to do? She trapped me with a baby, otherwise I would have married Lily. Now I'm stuck playing house with a woman I don't love, raising a child I never wanted. It's a lifetime sentence." I had enhanced the audio, removing the static, making his voice ring with crystal-clear venom. The video ended with a single line of text, white on a black screen. "This is what a lifetime sentence looks like." I saved the file. The surprise, I'd labeled it. It was ready. The ghost was ready to speak. Life in our little apartment settled into a new, fragile rhythm. The constant, gnawing fear of being found began to recede, replaced by the exhausting, joyful reality of caring for a newborn. Sebastian was changing every day, his features becoming more defined, his eyes focusing, his smiles becoming less gassy and more genuine. Each one felt like a personal victory, a tiny flag planted on the soil of our new, free life. My days were a dichotomy. There were sunlit mornings spent on a blanket on the floor, making silly faces at my son, his gurgles and coos the only music I needed. And then there were the late nights, hunched over the laptop in the dim glow of the screen, the city's ambient light filtering through the blinds as I fine-tuned my plans. The money from my successful trades gave me a breathing room I hadn't dared to hope for. I paid 6 months' rent in advance in cash to the kindly, oblivious landlord. I bought a second-hand crib and a changing table. I stocked the kitchen with food. It wasn't the opulence of the penthouse, but it was stability. It was safety. Sarah was my only link to the outside world, my smuggler of supplies and sanity. She came over twice a week, her daughter Maya in a sling against her chest, her tote bag full of groceries, gossip and moral support. "The buzz is insane, Ilara," she told me one afternoon while we sipped tea and our babies napped. "The postpartum psychosis story is starting to wear thin. People are asking questions. Why hasn't he shown a recent photo of you? Why no heartfelt televised plea? A few gossip columnists are even hinting that there might be more to the story." I felt a thrill of satisfaction. The public, fickle as they were, loved a mystery. And Alexander, used to controlling the narrative with an iron fist, was fumbling. His arrogance was making him clumsy. He thought the label of mental illness would be enough to silence all doubt. He underestimated people's appetite for the truth. "The gala is tomorrow night," I said, not looking up from the tiny sock I was putting on Sebastian's foot. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah's voice was heavy with concern. "It's nuclear, Lara. There's no coming back from this. For either of you." There was no coming back the moment he said those words to Lily. I said, my voice quiet but steel-edged. He made sure of that. This isn't about coming back. This is about making sure he can never do to anyone else what he did to me. This is about making sure Sebastian knows his mother fought for him. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Then I'll be watching. From the safety of my couch with a very large glass of wine. That night after Sarah left, I performed the final checks. I confirmed the delivery of the surprise video file to the AV company. I'd embedded it deep within the presentation files, disguised as a generic background video for the pre-speech mixer. I'd written specific time-locked instructions to the technician, from a fake email account posing as the event planner, to play that file at 9:05 p.m., immediately following Alexander's introduction. I had one last piece of business. The cord blood. Using my burner phone, I called BioFuture's customer service line. I put on my best, slightly frazzled new mother voice. Hi, yes, I'm calling to confirm the details for my son, Sebastian Blackwood. I just want to make absolutely sure about the access protocols. You see, I'm his mother, Elara Vance. I deliberately used my maiden name. And I just need to be certain that no one, and I mean no one, including his father, can access his specimen without my explicit notarized consent. We're going through a bit of a sensitive time. The representative, a woman with a soothing voice, pulled up the file. Yes, Mrs. Vance, I see that note here very clearly in the contract addendum. It's quite unusual, but it is legally binding as it was submitted with the original paperwork. The specimen is legally under your custodial authority. We cannot release it to Mr. Blackwood or anyone else, without your notarized written permission. It's for the child's protection, I understand. I closed my eyes, a wave of relief so powerful it made me lightheaded. I had it. I had the ultimate leverage. In Alexander's world, legacy was everything. Bloodlines were everything. And I held the key to his son's biological future. It was a cruel move, I knew that. But I was dealing with a cruel man. The day of the gala dawned bright and clear. I felt a surreal sense of calm. There was nothing left to do. The machinery was in motion. The traps were set. All that was left was to watch. I spent the day with Sebastian. We went for a long walk in a park he'd never seen before, far from our old life. I pointed out the dogs, the trees, the other children. I told him stories, not fairy tales, but stories about a brave boy and his mother who could do anything. I wanted this day to be filled with light and love, a counterbalance to the darkness I was about to unleash. As evening fell, I put Sebastian to bed, his belly full, his breathing soft and even. I kissed his forehead, inhaling his perfect, innocent scent. I love you more than anything in this world, I whispered. And tonight I make sure you're safe in it. I walked into the living room. The city twinkled outside my window. Somewhere in a glittering hotel ballroom, the great and good of the city were gathering. Alexander would be there in his tuxedo, playing the part of the tragic, stoic hero. Lily would probably be on his arm by now, the comforting, understanding ex-lover, ready to step into the role she felt was always meant to be hers. I turned on the television. A Entertainment News Channel was doing a red carpet special for the Blackwood Foundation Gala. It was live. My heart was a steady, determined drum in my chest. There was no rage left, no grief. There was only purpose. The screen showed a limousine pulling up. The door opened. And there he was. Alexander Blackwood. He looked handsome, severe, and utterly in control. He offered his hand and a woman emerged, a vision in pale blue silk. Lily. She clung to his arm, smiling at the cameras, a smile of triumphant possession. The reporters shouted their questions. Mr. Blackwood. Any word on your wife? Lily, is it true you and Alexander have rekindled your romance? Alexander held up a hand, his face a mask of pained dignity. Tonight is about the important work of the foundation, he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. It's what Elara would have wanted. We pray for her safe return. The lie was so effortless, so brazen it took my breath away. He was using my disappearance, my supposed mental breakdown, as a backdrop for his public reunion with the woman he truly loved. I watched them walk the red carpet, the perfect couple, stepping over the ruins of my life without a second glance. My fingers tightened around the remote. Just you wait, I thought, my eyes fixed on his smug, confident face on the screen. Your prayer is about to be answered. I'm coming back. Right now. I didn't change the channel. I sat down on my second-hand sofa, pulled a blanket over my legs and waited for the show to begin. The calm was over. The storm was here. The television broadcast was a surreal window into another universe. The ballroom was a vision of white orchids and crystal, exactly as I had designed it. The city's elite swirled in a kaleidoscope of designer gowns and black ties, their laughter a tinny, distant sound through the TV's speakers. It was my creation, my stage, and I was watching the play from the cheapest seat in the house. The news anchor, a woman with impossibly shiny hair, gushed about the event. "A bittersweet night for Blackwood Industries," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "A celebration overshadowed by tragedy, but also a show of remarkable strength from CEO Alexander Blackwood." The camera cut to Alexander standing near the podium, a glass of champagne in his hand. He was nodding gravely at something an older board member was saying. Lily was never far from his side, her hand a permanent fixture on his arm, her smile a little too bright. She was already playing the part of the future Mrs. Blackwood, the comforting pillar who had been there all along. My stomach churned, but I kept my breathing even. Sebastian was sleeping soundly in the next room, his monitor emitting soft, staticky breaths. He was my anchor, my reminder of why this ugly spectacle was necessary. The evening progressed according to the schedule I had crafted. Dinner was served. The band played a few bland, inoffensive numbers. Then the chairman of the foundation, a portly man named Charles, took to the podium to give the opening remarks. "Thank you all for coming," he boomed. "Tonight is a testament to the enduring spirit of philanthropy, and to the strength of the Blackwood family in the face of unforeseen challenges." He droned on about the foundation's work, but everyone was waiting for the main event. They were waiting for Alexander. Finally, Charles said the words I'd been waiting for. "And now, the man who needs no introduction. A leader, a visionary, and a man who has shown us all the meaning of fortitude this past week. Please welcome Alexander Blackwood." Polite, sympathetic applause filled the ballroom. Alexander straightened his tie, gave Lily's hand a squeeze, and walked to the podium with the confident stride of a man who owned the room. As he did. He thought he owned everything in it, including the truth. The camera zoomed in on his face. He looked out over the audience, his expression somber, dignified. "Thank you, Charles," he began, his voice resonating through the speakers. "Friends, colleagues, supporters. Your presence here tonight means more to me than I can say. As you know, this has been a deeply trying time for my family." He paused, letting the weight of his grief settle over the room. I could see the reporters in the back, scribbling in their notepads, buying every word. "This gala," he continued, "was the passion project of my wife, Ilara." He said my name with a practiced, heartbreaking tenderness. She worked tirelessly on every detail, wanting to create a night of magic and hope. It is a cruel twist of fate that she cannot be here to see her vision come to life. He was good. He was so good. I felt a perverse sense of pride in his performance. He had learned from the best, from me. "We can only pray that she is safe and that she gets the help she so desperately needs," he said, his voice dropping to a pained whisper. "And we must honor her by supporting the cause she held so dear. So, on her behalf, I thank you for your generosity tonight. And I ask you to keep her and our son Sebastian in your thoughts." It was the perfect, heartfelt speech. The audience was eating out of his hand. I saw several women dabbing at their eyes. Lily was looking at him with a worshipful gaze. This was it. The moment he finished, the AV presentation was supposed to begin. The screen behind him would light up with a montage of the foundation's work, set to an inspiring soundtrack. He was wrapping up. "So, thank you again. Let us move forward with hope, and with the knowledge that even in the darkest of times." He paused, expecting the screen to light up behind him. The audience expected it too. There was a beat of silence. Then the screen flickered to life. But it wasn't a montage of charity work. It was a photo of the two of us from the early days. We were on a beach, his arms wrapped around me from behind, my head thrown back in laughter. We looked incandescently happy. A collective, soft awe rippled through the crowd. Alexander, confused, glanced behind him. He saw the photo and offered a sad, nostalgic smile to the audience. He thought it was a tribute. "Ah, yes," he said into the microphone. "Happier times." Then the image changed. It was a screenshot of his text messages to me. "Cancel dinner. Stuck at the office. Don't wait up. The doctor's appointment is on the calendar. Take a car. The audience's murmur grew uneasy. Alexander's smile faltered. The image shifted again. It was a series of time-stamped photos I'd taken from our security system, showing his empty side of the bed, night after night after night. Then the screen went black. The piano music I'd chosen, a haunting, melancholic piece, began to play. And his voice, clear as a bell, filled the dead silence of the ballroom. I know, Father. I know it's a mess. But what was I supposed to do? She trapped me with a baby, otherwise I would have married Lily. Now I'm stuck playing house with a woman I don't love, raising a child I never wanted. It's a lifetime sentence. The words hung in the air, toxic and absolute. The camera, in a moment of sheer journalistic genius, swung from the screen to Alexander's face. All the color had drained from it. His mouth was slightly agape, his eyes wide with a kind of horrified, disbelieving shock. He looked like a man who had just been shot. The camera then swung to Lily, whose beautiful face was a mask of stunned betrayal. She wasn't looking at the screen, she was staring at Alexander, her hand flying to her mouth. The ballroom erupted. Not in applause, but in a deafening roar of gasps, shouts, and the frantic scraping of chairs as people stood to get a better view. Reporters were scrambling, phones were raised to record the chaos. On screen, the final message appeared: "This is what a lifetime sentence looks like." And then, as a final brutal footnote, the screen displayed a single recent photo. It was of Sebastian and me, taken by Sarah just a few days prior. He was in my arms, alert and healthy, his eyes bright. I was looking at the camera, my expression not one of psychosis but of clear, calm resolve. Beneath the photo the text read, "Sebastian and I are safe. We want no part of your prison. We are free." The broadcast feed cut off abruptly. The screen went to black, then the news anchor's stunned face reappeared. She was speechless for a full 3 seconds, a lifetime in television. "Oh, we seem to have lost the feed from the gala," she stammered, her professional composure shattered. "Viewers, you are witnessing an unprecedented event." I turned off the television. The silence in my apartment was profound. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious. Inside, my heart was pounding, a wild, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. It was done. I walked to Sebastian's room and stood in the doorway watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell in a peaceful, untroubled rhythm. He was safe. His father's perfect, pristine world was in ruins. The narrative had been shattered and I had been the one to swing the hammer. I had wanted to destroy him. And as I stood there listening to my son breathe, I knew I had succeeded. I hadn't just crashed his wedding to Lily, I had crashed his entire life. His reputation, his credibility, his carefully constructed image. It was all gone, vaporized in a 2-minute video. The revenge was complete. But as the adrenaline faded, I felt not elation but a deep, weary emptiness. The fire that had kept me warm for months had burned out. Now there was only the aftermath. The aftermath was a media firestorm of a magnitude I could never have imagined. My carefully orchestrated video clip was a bomb that detonated not just in that ballroom but across the entire world. It went viral in minutes. The narrative flipped on its head with brutal speed. Alexander Blackwood, the tragic hero, was now Alexander Blackwood, the heartless monster. The headlines were merciless. Blackwood's lies, trapped by a baby. Postpartum psychosis or paternal sociopathy? Lily Ashford, the other woman in the shadows. The footage of his face, frozen in shock and horror, was memed within hours. The audio clip of him calling his son a lifetime sentence became a ringtone for the vindictive. The board of Blackwood Industries went into emergency session. The company's stock plummeted. I watched it all from the sanctuary of my apartment, a ghost at the feast. My burner phone, the one only Sarah had the number for, buzzed incessantly for the first 24 hours. Unknown numbers. Blocked numbers. Then a number I recognized with a sick jolt. His mother. Then his father. Then the number for his head of security. I turned the phone off. They could scream into the void. I was done listening. The only call I took was from Sarah, her voice shaking with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Alaire, my God. I can't even. The entire internet is talking about you. People are calling you a hero. A vigilante mom." "I'm not a hero, Sarah," I said, my voice tired. I'm just a woman who was backed into a corner. What are you going to do now? He's going to come for you. Legally, I mean. He's going to try and get Sebastian. I know, I said. And I was prepared. The first legal letter arrived 2 days later, delivered by a process server who found my apartment with an efficiency that was impressive, if not surprising. It was a thick, creamy envelope from Blackwood, Sterling and Blackwood, his family's law firm. I almost laughed at the name. It was a cease and desist. It demanded I retract my defamatory statements, return Sebastian to his rightful home, and submit to a psychiatric evaluation. It threatened lawsuits, custody battles, and financial ruin. It was a scare tactic. A show of force from a man who was used to winning by intimidation. I didn't respond. Instead, I hired a lawyer. Not a high-profile celebrity attorney who would drag this through the tabloids, but a sharp, relentless family law specialist named Miriam Goldstein, who had a reputation for eviscerating wealthy, powerful fathers in custody cases. I paid her retainer with the money from my trades. It felt like poetic justice. Miriam's first move was to file for sole legal and physical custody of Sebastian, citing Alexander's recorded statement as evidence of emotional abandonment and a fundamental lack of paternal bond. Her second move was to file a restraining order, citing his deceptive and coercive behavior and the public harassment campaign his office had waged against me. The game had moved from the court of public opinion to a real court of law. And I was ready. A week after the gala, as I was pushing Sebastian in his stroller through the park, I saw the newspapers in a vending machine. The story was still on the front page. But there was a new development. A grainy photo of Alexander, looking haggard and decades older, leaving his office building through a back entrance. The headline read, "Blackwood steps down ASO amid scandal." He had fallen. The throne he valued more than his family was gone. I felt a pang then, not for him but for the man I'd once thought he was. The man I'd loved had never existed. He was a phantom, a construct designed to lure me in. Seeing the reality of him broken should have felt like a victory, but it just felt sad. Hollow. That night, as I was feeding Sebastian his last bottle, my doorbell rang. My blood ran cold. No one came here. Sarah always texted first. The landlord always called. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Alexander. He stood in the dim hallway light, alone. He was unshaven, his clothes rumpled, his shoulders slumped. The powerful CEO was gone, replaced by a shattered man. He looked human. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. I didn't open the door. I stood there, my heart hammering, Sebastian cradled protectively in my arms. "Elara." His voice was muffled through the door, ragged and tired. "I know you're there. Please. I just want to talk." I remained silent. "I saw the photo," he continued, his voice breaking. "Of him. He has my eyes." A hot, bitter anger surged in me. Now he sees a resemblance? Now he feels a connection? "Go away, Alexander," I said, my voice cold and clear through the wood. "Or I'll call the police. The restraining order is already filed." He was silent for a long moment. I could hear his ragged breathing. "What you did, you destroyed me, Elara." "You destroyed us first," I replied, my tone flat. "I just showed the world the wreckage." "I know," he whispered, and the admission shocked me. "I know what I said was unforgivable. I was angry. I was trapped by my father's expectations, by the company. I took it out on you. On him." He was trying to justify it. To explain it away. To make himself the victim of circumstance. "You had a choice," I said, my voice trembling with a fury I thought I'd spent. "Every single day you had a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to deceive me. You chose to resent our son. You don't get to blame your father or your company. The lifetime sentence was your choice." He didn't deny it. He leaned his forehead against the door and I heard a soft thud. Can I just see him? Just once." The request, so plaintive, so utterly devoid of his usual arrogance, was a masterful play. It was designed to appeal to my humanity, to the memory of the love I'd once borne him. But that love was ash. "No," I said, the finality in my voice absolute. "You lost that right. You called him a sentence you never wanted. You don't get to look at him now that you've lost everything else. He is not your consolation prize." I heard a choked sob from the other side of the door. A real one. "Elara, please. Goodbye, Alexander." I walked away from the door, back into the warm light of my living room, away from the ghost in the hallway. I sat in the rocking chair and held Sebastian close, humming until his eyes drifted shut. I had won. I had my freedom, my son, my life. The revenge was complete, the enemy was vanquished. So why did I feel so empty? Why did the silence now feel so loud? I had been living on vengeance for so long, I had forgotten what it felt like to just live. The fire was out and all that was left was the cold, gray ash. And the daunting, terrifying task of building a new life from it. The months that followed Alexander's visit were a time of quiet reconstruction. The legal battle was arduous, but with Miriam's brilliance and the undeniable evidence of Alexander's own words, we were victorious. I was granted sole custody, with Alexander receiving supervised visitation rights he never once exercised. The cease and desist letters stopped. The scandal, as all scandals do, eventually faded from the front pages, replaced by newer, juicier tragedies. I sold the penthouse, the jewelry, everything that was part of that old life. The money was placed in a trust for Sebastian, a nest egg for his future, completely separate from the Blackwood fortune. I wanted no part of it. My own small trading portfolio continued to grow steadily. I started doing freelance PR consulting, working from home on my own terms for clients I chose. I was my own boss. I was Alara Vance again. Spring turned to summer. Sebastian was 6 months old, a happy, curious baby with a gummy grin that could light up the darkest of rooms. He was sitting up on his own, grabbing for toys, babbling "mama," with an infectious joy that healed the broken parts of me piece by piece. One sunny Saturday, Sarah and I took the babies to the zoo. It was a world of simple, uncomplicated pleasures. The smell of popcorn, the silly antics of the monkeys, the feel of the warm sun on our skin. Sebastian was mesmerized by the elephants, his eyes wide with wonder. I watched him, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "You look happy," Sarah said, nudging me with her elbow as we pushed our strollers past the sea lion exhibit. "I am," I said, and for the first time I truly meant it. The emptiness had been filled. Not by revenge but by this. By morning cuddles, by pureed carrots smeared on highchair trays, by the exhausting, wonderful, mundane reality of motherhood and friendship. It was on our way out near the exit that I saw him. Not Alexander. Someone else. I was buying a sippy cup from the gift shop when I literally bumped into a man, sending the cup clattering to the floor. "I'm so sorry," we said in unison, both bending down to pick it up. Our hands brushed, and I looked up into a pair of the kindest green eyes I'd ever seen. He was tall, with sun-streaked brown hair and a face that was more rugged than handsome, creased with laugh lines around his eyes. He was holding the hand of a little girl about 3 years old, with pigtails and a stuffed giraffe clutched tightly under her arm. "No, my fault, I wasn't looking where I was going," he said with a warm, easy smile. He handed me the sippy cup. His gaze fell to Sebastian, who was babbling in his stroller. "He's adorable." "Thank you," I said, feeling an unexpected blush creep up my neck. "Your daughter is beautiful." "Daddy, can I have ice cream?" the little girl asked, tugging on his hand. "In a minute, Chloe," he said, his voice full of affection. He looked back at me, his smile lingering. "Well, enjoy the rest of your day." "You too," I said, and watched as he walked away, his daughter swinging from his arm. It was just a moment. A brief, meaningless interaction. But it didn't feel meaningless. For the first time since my world had collapsed, I had looked at a man and felt not fear or anger or resentment, but a flicker of interest. It was a tiny, fragile thing, like the first green shoot after a long winter. A few weeks later, I was at a neighborhood coffee shop, trying to work while Sebastian napped in his stroller beside me. I was struggling with a client proposal, my brow furrowed in concentration. Rough day. I looked up. It was him. The man from the zoo. He was holding a laptop bag and smiling that same easy smile. "You could say that," I said, surprised at the flutter in my stomach. "Mind if I?" He gestured to the empty chair at my small table. "Sure," I said a little too quickly. He sat down. "I'm Ben," he said, extending his hand. I took it. His grip was firm, warm. "Alara. It's good to see you again, Alara." His eyes crinkled at the corners. I was hoping I would. We talked. He was a landscape architect, a widower. His wife had passed away from cancer when Chloe was just a baby. He spoke of her with love and sadness, but without the bitterness that had once poisoned me. He understood loss. He understood rebuilding. I didn't tell him my whole story. I just said I was a single mom, a freelancer starting over. He didn't press. He just listened. We started meeting for coffee. Then with the babies for trips to the park. It was slow. It was gentle. It was real. Ben wasn't a whirlwind. He wasn't a fantasy. He was solid ground. He was the man who remembered that I liked my coffee with 2 sugars, who didn't flinch when Sebastian had a meltdown in a restaurant, who held my hand not as a possession but as an anchor. One evening he cooked dinner for us at his house. Chloe was showing Sebastian her toys and Ben and I were standing at the sink washing dishes. The setting sun streamed through the window, painting the kitchen in gold. He turned to me, his green eyes serious. I know you've been through hell, Alara. I'm not asking for your whole story. I'm just asking if I can be a part of your next chapter. I looked at him, at this good, kind man who had known profound loss and had chosen to build a life filled with love, not revenge. I looked over at our children playing together on the floor. I thought of Alexander, a ghost from a life that no longer felt like my own. The revenge had been a cold comfort. It had given me purpose, but it hadn't given me peace. This felt like peace. I reached out and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. I'd like that, I said, my voice soft but sure. I'd like that very much. The story that had begun with a trap and been defined by destruction was over. A new story was starting, one not built on the ruins of the old but on fresh, solid ground. A story of second chances, of slow love, of a sunrise after the long, dark night. I was finally free. And I was ready to begin. The end.